Dr. Daniel Sabol, and welcome to the Cognitive Edge, where you'll gain insight, innovation, and tools that you could possibly bring back to your libraries or your students to help them gain new information, knowledge, and ideas. I'd like to introduce a very special guest that I have today. That is Dr. Terry Kirchner. He is the director of the Westchester Library System. Dr. Kirchner, I just want to thank you for coming today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Perfect. So, I just want to get started with you because there's so many things to talk about. Libraries are in, we're always kind of in that state of motion. And so the first thing, though, is where and how did you get to the point that you did? How did you kind of grow to this point? It's like amazing, and it always amazed me.
I would say a lot of it was sort of by happenstance, right? So my very first library job was in college. The typical page circulation desk worker, that kind of thing. Enjoyed it, had a lot of fun, really enjoyed interacting with the other students and whatnot. But then when I graduated college, I kind of moved on and had my first job out of college. And my first job actually was as a flight attendant. So I worked for about 6 years, did domestic and international flights, and loved it, right? A great opportunity, a way to see the world. But I also think it was the best training ground for customer service, right? There's nothing like being, thousands of feet in the air, trapped with other individuals to force you to figure out how to come to the yes response to most things. Or if you said no, you found a really creative way to do it that didn't upset anybody.
Right.
And I think that training, when I got my first library job, which was, must have been like about 1990. I went to Rutgers Library School while I was a flight attendant because I was able to do both. So my very first job was at the New York Public Library Research Centers, and I worked in their science and technology division. And it was a really interesting time in that a lot of Russian scientists were coming to America, and what they needed was English translations of the work that they had done in Russia so that they could get jobs in America. I don't speak Russian. I barely understood chemistry, but somehow, because I was the new kid on the block, I became the chemistry librarian. So there I was, right? And it's one of those things where you sink or swim. I was fortunate. I swam quite well. And, really kind of eventually figured out, how to make this work. And I kind of put it out there because I think most of us have this idea what our first day on the job will look like, and it's never like that.
Right.
But I also think, the first impression that you make on that first day is whether or not you're a team player or you're someone who's going to step back and say, it's not my job. And I've always been a, let's give it a whirl, see what happens kind of person. And I think that's part of how I've gotten to where I am, because I've been willing to take chances for things that I probably were beyond my skill set, but I figured it out. And I've always been pretty transparent about that. I'm like, I've never done this. I'll give it a try, but I expect you not to yell at me
Right.
when I mess up the first 2 times.
When you were, now that you're at the point you're at, did you ever think you'd be at this point, that you'd be the director of 38 libraries in our county? And
Never. I never even thought I would be in Westchester County. I love living in New York City. I thought I was there for life. But sometimes life just presents different opportunities. And one of the things that happened when I was at NYPL for my very first job is that I made a good working relationship with an individual who got a job at Columbia Universities to be the director of the science and engineering libraries there. And basically, she had an opening about a year later. And through that positive working relationship we had together, she said, I think you'd be a strong candidate. Please apply. And I got the job. So then I went to Columbia. And so then I was managing the access services for the 6 science libraries at Columbia University.
Wow.
And it was a really great opportunity. You know, it's a totally different beast than the public library setting. A lot of the same skill sets, transferable, but there are certain expectations that faculty members and teachers have that the public doesn't have. You know, it's just a different rhythm. I was there, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years. And one of the things that happened there is that I still had a fair amount of contact with NYPL, just because we're both in the city. There's a lot of interlibrary loan that happens between the 2 organizations, you know, whatnot. Well, I ended up going on a field trip, which was to have a shared remote storage facility between Columbia and NYPL. And I ended up riding in the car with the vice president for the research libraries, just because that's how it worked out.
Right.
By the time I got out of that car, I just been recruited to go back and work at NYPL. So I ended up getting a different job at NYPL, which was to be the director or access services director for their public services. So it was basically working with all of their student workers. So I had about 100 and some student workers that were under me, and then a bunch of the public service departments. So it was like a step up, sort of taking what I'd learned at Columbia, just sort of did it at a larger scale. And that also included running interlibrary loan and a lot of the other resource sharing opportunities. So with each step up I've taken, it's been an opportunity to take what I've learned, kind of use it as a foundation, but then go learn some new skills.
Okay.
And I did that probably for like 8 years. And don't you know it, that Columbia came knocking on my door and said, "Hey, we have an opening. We think it'd be good if you came back." So I went back to Columbia. So I was very fortunate in that I had what I would call soft interviews for most of this, right? Because I was a known entity and whatnot. And I worked this time at Columbia doing access services again, but I really tried to help coordinate the services of the 23 Columbia libraries, where there are certain principles that would be consistent across libraries, but then each would have their own unique qualities, which really set me up quite well for what I do now, which is working with 38 independent libraries in Columbia, in Westchester County, and trying to find a way to make sure that we have consistent service throughout the county, and that we really maximize resources. So, my transition here makes a lot of sense in hindsight, but it was not something I had ever planned on. It just sort of happened. And mainly because I said yes to a lot of things.
You've always been as long as I've known you, which has been many years now, you've always been a terrific leader and manager, and just a good guy in general. And I think that helps open doors. And I think that helps, move forward. Do you have any advice for new graduates that are coming into the field?
Say, find ways to invest in yourself. I think one of the downfalls I see in many individuals is that they have this hope or expectation that their library will provide the training and the assistance that they need to move forward. And as much as I would like to say that happens, it's a very rare occasion.
Right.
So I would say, to the extent possible, find ways to support your ongoing growth and education. And I will be perfectly frank, one of the reasons I was able to rise up in some of these positions is because I continued to go to school. I have my library degree, but I did go back and I got an MBA. And my MBA is actually from Baruch College. So I did CUNY. It was very affordable in all things considered. And then when I worked on my PhD, I did it class by class, and it took me forever. It took me about 10 years because if I couldn't pay for the class, I wasn't taking the class. So, it was just that constant chipping away at my own personal growth and development. And I know that there's always a lot of variables, right? There could be family issues. There could be a million reasons why this isn't possible. But not everybody needs a PhD or an MBA. There are certificate programs. There are also just opportunities where you have the self-learning, self-growth, other avenues that allow you to see different perspectives. It's too easy to sort of know what you know and not challenge that.
Right. And I could appreciate that. And it sounds like to me you've always were a guy who worked, you outworked people. You had the I don't know, I guess endurance or the motivation to want to learn and you put in the hours, and you had the drive to get you to where you sort of wanted to be.
Yeah, I would say yes. And I think, part of it too is, once again, life circumstances. I think we may have frozen here, so I'm not sure you can still hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
And once again, I just want to, be clear, it's not a competition, right? It's not like who accomplishes what per se, but it's more about being on a perpetual journey. I also think some of my biggest lessons in life have been from hard moments, right? Like when I was younger, my mom had a long-term illness, and I needed to fly back to Illinois to see her occasionally, help relieve my sister, that kind of journey. And most people have had to experience that. What I took from that journey was, wow, as a boss, I've really got to kind of rethink some of our traditional rules, because I had the flexibility to do it because I was like number one, right? As the head honcho, I had a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
But what does it mean for the other people who work for me, right? So it was sort of that reflective moment of, oh, we've got to update our handbook. We need to rethink, how we can make it possible for people to be able to take care of loved ones when, these types of illnesses and whatnot happen. So I think there's a certain strength in maybe empathy and kindness that isn't always recognized in traditional management and leadership discussions.
Right.
And I feel like as libraries, we have an opportunity to break that mold. It's not always easy because many times we're tied into municipal regulations or civil service or existing union contracts and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that we can't chip away at this stuff, right? And start to plant the seeds that there are other approaches. Not everything is about power over. A lot of it is about power with. How do we sort of together, collectively, work to make some changes happen?
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sorry for deviating a little bit, but I have you here, so let me ask. So my final question is, where do you see libraries? And I know it's hard to judge because technology changes overnight, but where do you see libraries in the next, say, 3 years or so? 3 or 5 years, in that range.
Yeah, I actually think we have a very positive future. I think that at the end of the day, good libraries are libraries that focus on people. If we really think about how do we positively engage with our community, and whether it's the public or school or whomever, how we engage with them and sort of listen for what are the need gaps, what are the things that people are saying, I could really use some assistance with this. And just the ability to listen and to respond, I think, is what makes libraries such a trusted institution. And as long as we maintain that, there will always be a place for us.
Sure. I agree 100%. I think I'm frozen again, and I apologize, but my camera should catch up with me. So I want to thank you for coming on. I mean, it really means a lot. And what you said today was very moving, and it was very informative. So, anyhow, I do appreciate this, and Dr. Kirchner, I do hope to talk to you soon, and I look forward to seeing you.
My pleasure. And, I just encourage you to keep going, and for everyone else to just do the best they can, right? That's all we can ask of each other.
I hear you. Thanks so much, Dr. Kirchner.
All right, take care.
Yeah,
Bye.
talk to you soon. Bye-bye.